Good evening, everyone. Good evening. All right, some people are hearing me. I'm the Reverend Peter Ackerman. I'm the rector here at Episcopal Church of St. John the Baptist. For you who are here live and in person, welcome. To those of you who are watching from home, whether live or watching at a different time, welcome. I'm glad you're all here. Thank you to all of you who were here for other sessions or at least watched other sessions. Please know those sessions are available on our Facebook page, Episcopal Church of St. John the Baptist, Lodi, California, and you can watch them if you want to. We are here about understanding the homeless crisis, and specifically tonight, the question for us is, where do we go from here? And I find often in the life of the church that we tend to want to let them fix it, let them do something. And I encourage us tonight to find out where what I will call the Spirit, that's what does it for me, the Spirit is calling us to participate. Where is your passion? Where is your passion to engage, to be a part? And your passion has to do with your abilities as well. So I hope the Spirit finds you tonight, and to help guide that, before I turn this over to Catherine Siddle, I will pray to a higher power whom I refer to as God, but acknowledging that we have many people here who refer to higher powers in different ways. So let us pray. Gracious and loving God, I thank you for this night. I thank you for the speakers, the volunteers, the people who've helped put this together, and especially for all of us who are present now. Send your fire upon us and kindle in our hearts the passions, and help us find out how we can serve the least of these in our community in palpable ways. This I pray for in your name. Amen. Thank you. And now Catherine Siddle, I think, is coming up. There she is.
I'm so grateful to see so many of you keep coming back. Thank you. It's really nice to be able to wrap this up with all of you here tonight. I want to see if I can stick to the script tonight. As you know, I'm Catherine Siddle. I'm from the Lodi Committee on Homelessness, and tonight's our third session on We're Looking Forward. And we're going to have the source of this, our Deacon Tom, who this was his brainchild. This was his idea, and he's the one who brought us all together with this thought and started all these discussions. So he's going to come up and introduce the group discussion.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, all of you, for coming to this, our third and concluding session on the issue of homelessness in our midst. We've had conversations at the beginning of each session on our understandings of why people are homeless, our impressions of the homeless people that we see in our midst, and how those impressions might either inform or perhaps obstruct our understanding of what's actually happening. Tonight, the question for you is a different one. It's about hope, part of what Father Peter just alluded to. It's like in the stories that you've heard, the presentations that you've listened to, the video that we've seen, what was it that gave you hope that this is not simply an impossible crisis, but a crisis that invites the intervention that can make change for all of us? So the question is, what is it that have given you hope to this time? And the second related question is, how might you help to foster that hope? What are you feeling you might be called to do about what you've learned? So I'd invite you to pair up with a person, and we're just going to take about 5 minutes, so maybe 2 minutes for each person to share whatever came to mind in response to that question. So find a partner and engage with them, please. The other person give their impressions. Thanks. 2 more minutes. Much for engaging in that conversation. In a moment, Catherine is going to come back up here and introduce our panel for this evening. But I wanted to point out, you each will have received, when you came in, a small index card and a yellow evaluation sheet along with your program. For the duration of our time with the panel, if there's a question that occurs to you that you'd like to be asked of that person or someone else in the panel, would you please write that on that card? At the end of the panel discussion, we'll have a brief moment where other people will be asking you for questions, and they will all be collected so that they'll be addressed to the panel. So we'll have an opportunity to get people to respond to the questions that you have. The yellow sheet or orange sheet, however you describe it, is the evaluation form. At the conclusion of this evening, before you go, I would really ask you to spend some time completing that form, because your input to us will be very helpful as we think about how we might do events like this in the future. So with that said, I'm going to turn this over to Catherine. Thank you for your attention.
So I have the privilege of introducing our panel, which I'm very excited about. Tonight we're going to have Peter Ragsdale. There you are. Peter is the Executive Director of the Housing Authority of San Joaquin County, and he's going to talk about the COC and a lot of what's going on in their world. David Diskin, who not only has been our wonderful AV guy, David Wave, he's also the chair of the Lodi Improvement Committee, and he's going to be talking about Harmony Homes. Johnny Cochran, who many of you heard speak on our first session, he is the chair of our Point in Time, which we made reference to last week, but he's the chair of the Point in Time count for us, and he is going to be talking about his experience and his knowledge of the reason why we need this low barrier shelter, why the reason we're headed that direction. And then we have special guest, Major Harold Lombach Jr. He's from Modesto, so he and Tom get the Travel the Furthest award, and he's going to talking about the experience of running the low barrier shelter in Modesto. And last but certainly not least, Jennifer Ryan. She is the Neighborhood Services Manager, Wave, from the City of Lodi, and she works in the Community Development Department. And she's going to be giving the City of Lodi's perspective on where we're headed and how you can get involved. So without any further ado, I'm going to ask Peter, this is yours. Thank you.
Well, thanks. And I spent a lot of time and a 30-year career working in housing. And I'm a transplant to California, but if you do what I do, housing is certainly in crisis in our state. This is not just a function of deeply affordable or housing for the homeless, but as I was sitting, just killing a few minutes, I'll give you a little context that just looking at the Sacramento newspaper, there's an estimate of, and Sacramento's growing, but our not too distant neighbor, that based on growth, they're going to need 45,580 new housing units in Sacramento by 2029. Based on income, 16,000 and change of those need to be affordable. So this crisis didn't happen overnight. You know, the type of housing, how it's built, where it's built, the infrastructure that's lacking in California has contributed to the problem of homelessness. And if we're going to be honest, there are people that work tirelessly with a difficult and challenging group of folks in some cases to provide shelter. But I am of the opinion that, shelter is sleep, but housing will ultimately solve homelessness. So, I think that the state of California has started to realize that this is not going to happen by accident, and regardless of politics, at least there's some focus in Sacramento on bringing resources to communities like Lodi and certainly San Joaquin County around dollars that open doors. And if we don't start thinking intentionally and getting to being housing advocates, candidly, if rents and the cost of homes continue to rise, how would we not continue to see more unsheltered homeless? I mean, it's just the reality that if we're looking at building single family only in our communities, that leaves a lot of people out. If we're looking at building multifamily that's only catering to people that are typically moving in to San Joaquin County, in the 6 years I've been here, and I live in Lodi, but before I spent some time in Tracy, there was a good deal of development down by Costco in the Auto Loop in Tracy, and those are folks that are coming into the Bay Area, and for people that pay mortgages, you can rent a one-bedroom apartment on the Auto Loop in Tracy for $2,200 a month. So I ask you, I'm saying to you, who are we building for? And if there is a lack of intentionality about serving people that live and work in San Joaquin County, we're going to have to start changing up that dynamic. So I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the projects we're working on, some of the populations, and realistically some of the state resources, state and federal resources that build housing. In sort of our semi-rural, semi-urban county, we don't have some of the resources that Los Angeles and San Francisco have that we often compete with. But from a public policy standpoint, I think this is hopefully an opportunity to inform. We can see some of the resources that we can bring to bear to solve homelessness. And then I think, as I would hope, that when we have community conversations like this, that people are more willing to entertain being a housing advocate. So with that, we can flip through some slides. So super quickly about the Housing Authority, we touch about 6,500 households in San Joaquin County. That's affordable, that's senior, that's agricultural housing, and over the last few years we're also doing some projects specifically for the homeless. Primarily our money comes from the federal government. We have about an operating budget of about $60 million. Most of that money is paid to private landlords to keep roughly 4,700 households in San Joaquin County under roof. We have a nonprofit development arm. Currently we have a project in partnership with San Joaquin County. I'm hoping when people see Drive Down 5 past Stockton, you're seeing the new community benefit outpatient clinic for the VA going up in French Camp right next to the county hospital. So we had pitched an idea to the county to do housing for homeless veterans adjacent to that property. So sort of diagonally through the county hospital, the county of San Joaquin ground leased 5 acres to us. We have a 49-unit homeless veterans project in San Joaquin County under construction, which is exciting, and 49 units is not going to solve our crisis for homeless veterans, but for the most deserving population, we're excited as a very, very positive first step. And candidly, the VA, the Veterans Administration, does case management for Housing Authority, develops and provides rental assistance. But the VA does case management, and of course we're going to have a 100,000 square foot building where that nexus of housing and health care will hopefully help people make that transition from homelessness to be successful, in permanent supportive housing. When we talk about the types of housing that we need in California, we're not going to exclusively build our way out of this. As I said, this Veterans Project is brand new ground-up construction. One of the things that I think we have to consider, and I think if we look around Lodi or other parts of San Joaquin County, there are plenty of buildings that could use some love. We did the same. We had outgrown our offices in downtown Stockton, and in partnership with County Behavioral Health, we repurposed 2 buildings into 27 studio apartments for behavioral health clients. And that sort of gives you that slide. That was our former administrative offices. The county put about $5 million into that project for 27 units, new kitchens, new bathrooms, essentially gut rehab. But that's a 20-year contract with behavioral health to exclusively refer people to this property. So in total, we did 39 units with a third building that isn't on this site. But we didn't have a use for it. We could sell it and move, but it made a lot of sense to take a building that really had sort of, run out of its useful life as an office into housing. And I have to say that it's been successful. People pay an affordable rent. The Housing Authority provides rental assistance. So folks come in, pay no more than 30% of their income for rent. If that income is $1,000 a month, they pay no more than $300. If that income is $500 a month, they pay $150. But there's no question that the folks from behavioral health that are doing this work to stabilize and to really deliver quality care to people with mental health challenges, when you know where they're living and that they have the ability to have dignity in their lives, that medical care improves. As taxpayers, people that go into crisis, I think about it, and for that person that is housing unstable and goes into crisis and presents at an emergency department, whether that's the county hospital or St. Joe's or Adventist Health, what does that triage cost when somebody comes in crisis? $200,000, $300,000? What would it cost if somebody goes in as in an emergency department for 6 or 7 days and dies? That's the reality of not having sufficient places for people to get health care. So I honestly think there's a nexus of housing and health care that also we have to consider, that we just look at this strictly from dollars and cents. There are creative ways to build housing, and like I said, I can't quite read it, but there's a budget that talked about roughly the property that we donated, the roughly $5 million of behavioral health money that paid for the bricks and sticks, and that'll provide housing for people for 20 years. Another example is a project similar, same type of product that Lodi is working on right now, called Turnpike Commons. We did this in partnership with the Stockton Shelter for the Homeless, STAND, and Central Valley Low-Income Housing. But we did 11 units of manufactured housing. These are the units that you see coming down the highway that sort of are divided. But two bedrooms in the front and ADUs, 1-bedroom small units in the back, for a total of 9 units. So I would like to say that this project, while wonderful in its design and concept, was not inexpensive. I think that's part of the dialogue I think that's happening when we use federal dollars. These projects trigger state and federal wage rates. We build to a commercial standard. So when I think people talk about the cost of affordable housing, in this case, since this property in Stockton infill was part of the floodplain, we had to bring the units up 3 feet. We put in a large private driveway, which met fire code. We had to move a Cal water line. It's challenging. So I look back and say, would I have done something different? I would have, because ultimately, this is a textbook example of zoning really being the problem. This is R1 zoning. So we had 7 lots, 2 of which had a cow water pipe, may have been feasible to build on. So we took 5 lots, put a single-family unit in front and an ADU in the back. I would contend that if we really wanted to produce the most amount of housing, by right, an affordable developer like me should be able to go into the city and say, hey, we want to put up a multifamily building. I might have gotten 15 apartments instead of 9. The bang for the buck, getting that ability to have that dialogue with local communities, and I understand this tension between local control and state mandates, but candidly, I think if we are going to be honest and we absolutely hate homelessness, we're going to have to love housing. And if we love housing, we're going to have to do it the most efficient and effective way. So while this is a good project, and again, it's literally the families that I saw that were moving from the Stockton Shelter for the Homeless. I know there's been a lot of discussion about sheltering, which is absolutely critical to get people ready for housing. But the reality is, I wish they had more. And that's really the only takeaway that, as we start to contemplate the type of housing we build and the density, residential zoning, R1 zoning that says, look, you're limited to this particular footprint, I think is also part of the problem as to why we have the type and the housing crisis that we have. Next slide. Adjacent to the first project that I showed you, our old offices, we bought the remainder of the block. There's an existing commercial building on that side as well. We have No Place Like Home money, which is a state program through HCD for folks with mental health challenges and housing instability, which will be an additional 39 units on the next block, again, for behavioral health clients. So between the 3 buildings, we're looking at about 75 total units for behavioral health. And again, for people that are presenting in crisis, that are unable to essentially stay on medication and struggle with, their daily living, I was concerned, what property management would be like. The Housing Authority manages about 1,400 units in the county, so this was our first foray into supportive housing. I'm going to knock wood, but to tell you the truth, it's been excellent. Behavioral health is there every day, so that people have that touch, a light touch from their landlord. I mean, you have to pay your rent, you can't wreck the apartment, but there's security, we have an on-site property manager, and it's been successful. I'm very optimistic that this is a model that's replicable, and again, we took buildings in Stockton that needed that love and attention, and I'm proud to say that it's housing, but it's beautiful housing, and we're very, very proud of it, and we're excited. This project is about a $15 million cost. And the bulk of that money. So I want to think about this from a taxpayer and an ROI basis. That was about $1 million of the county's money to acquire the property, about $2 million in gap financing, but that's $9 million in tax credit equity that comes from the federal government through the states, a $2 million No Place Like Home. So if I said to you, we all think about our retirement accounts, and I said, if you put in $1, I'll give you $5, I think most people would say, how much can I put in? So I think that is the mindset to say that, look, yes, we have to come up with local match. Yes, we have to find property that's acceptable for permanent supportive housing. And yes, it is a challenge in communities where you have so many resources it needs, parks and recreation, all of these types of things that compete for dollars. But if we want to be honest, I'm saying to you, there is a cost to unsheltered homelessness. There's a cost to people not living in their cars and RV parking and all those types of things. So I think this is the intentionality that I'd like people to consider, is that there are dollars we have to successfully compete for, and if we start to make that bargain as a community to put our money where our mouth is, so to speak, in many cases it comes back multiplied. Victory Gardens is our veterans project. I said in French Camp, yep. So 49 units for homeless veterans with permanent supportive housing. We're super excited to see that project break ground. We're pouring concrete these coming weeks, and hopefully we'll have people in housing this time next year. So, again, the last thing I'd like to leave folks with, as part of the ARP money, the Housing Authority received 232 emergency housing vouchers with landlord incentives. We have a bit of a press conference with the City of Stockton and our Board of Supervisors tomorrow, that private landlords that have multifamily, if we want to get people out of shelters, off the streets, California got the largest share nationally, 17,000 vouchers. That represents about $350 million of rental assistance. We should be successful. So, thank you very much for your time.
I get to be up here this time, driving. All right, let's make sure my thing still works. There we go. So, just real quick, raise your hand if you've driven past Lodi Avenue in the last, 4 or 5 days. You guys see the buildings? 3 out of 4, not bad, right? 75% of the way there. I'm so excited about Harmony Homes. It's a pleasure for me to tell you a little bit about it. I want to remind you that this is what the lot used to look like for 25 years. It just sat there right across the street from Smart and Final, right around where A&W is. And, I don't like waste. And to see that we've got this perfect property centered right in the middle of Lodi, right next to all of these great resources that we've put our donations and our heart and our tax dollars into, and there's this property that's just sitting there, right? I think it's awesome that we've taken this small area, and I know it's just a drop in the bucket to what we need to do, but it's a beginning. And that's how I see Harmony Homes from a planning perspective and addressing homelessness, but also a beginning for the people who are going to live there, the 4 families that eventually will soon move in. I want to remind you that, one of the whole purposes of this is to help people escape the cycle of homelessness. I know that we're all upset about it from one perspective or another, but we have to come up with some kind of solution, and that's really what this helps us do. We can build shelters. And I have no problem with Salvation Army and Lodi House and Cranes Landing and all of these other places, but we need to get people out of them at some point. I think my friends at Salvation Army will completely agree. It would be lovely if everybody had a permanent home. And so when we talk about escaping the cycle, that's exactly what we mean by that, is we mean helping, there we go, helping people get not just permanent subsidized housing, but to become self-reliant, right? That's what we're trying to do. And, I love the story from people like Betty, who graduated from the Salvation Army here in Lodi, the Culinary Academy. I had to change my life. I got tired of being sick and tired. And this program helped me get my faith back. I got my self-esteem back, my children back, and my life back again. I got all types of culinary skills from this program. I now want to work in a restaurant as a prep cook. And we've heard stories like this over and over again. We know that all we need to do is give people a chance and get that feeling of where's my next meal going to come from? How am I going to escape the wind and the cold? Get that out of here, and so they can focus on building the rest of their life. Again, there are existing shelters in Lodi that are amazing. I've donated countless hours to Lodi House and the Women's Center, and I love the Salvation Army just as much, but for the most part, they are at capacity. They have limitations on how long you can stay there, and there are some barriers to admission, some of which we're going to be talking about tonight. And so they are not the only answer to the problem of homelessness. There's also existing affordable housing in Lodi. How many of you know about Washington Street, Cranes Landing, or the Lodi Hotel? Again, they are at capacity. There is an exhaustive waiting list to move in. They're not enough. So when the opportunity came to us to take a large amount of money and claim it for the city of Lodi, we jumped at it. And again, I cannot credit enough Catherine Siddle and Patrice, John, and Jennifer who made this happen. But it had goals that we needed to accomplish. We couldn't just take the money and do something with it. We had to do something with purpose with it. We wanted to make sure that this new project was partnering with those same organizations that I just talked about, that it had minimal long-term overhead for the city, right? I don't want to be out there mowing the grass. I don't think any of you do. That it had to be affordable for the people to move in. We didn't want to renovate something. We wanted to make something. And I hope you can see the value in making something over renovating. Renovating is important. I'm trying to renovate my house all the time, but that doesn't add additional homes. That doesn't make more bedrooms, more beds for people to live in. We can renovate all day long, but the number of homes is still the same. We had to develop. Of course, it has to pass all kind of environmental inspections and other regulations with noise and train tracks and things like that that I have no clue about, but that man does. And it has to be safe. And I think important to the people who helped put this together, it also had to be usable. You know, what good is it to somebody who's trying to escape homelessness, who's trying to find a job, who's trying to help their kids stay in school, if the closest job is 5 miles away, if there is no bus stop unless they want to do a 2-mile walk first, and if the closest school is 4 miles away? That doesn't help anybody get out of that cycle. And so the neighborhood in which Harmony Homes now lives, you're all familiar with it, right in the center of Lodi, right over there. There's again those same pictures. And so what we're looking at, and again, if you've driven by it, I'll show you a couple pictures in just a minute. Sorry, this is, there we go, okay. This is the proposed drawing. It's absolutely beautiful. It doesn't quite look like that yet, but it is fantastic. And these are the services that are right around the corner. Bus stop, grocery stores, elementary schools, auto services, a library, Lowell Senior Center. We often forget that so many of our homeless and at-risk people are seniors themselves. Community gardens, and of course, jobs, jobs, jobs. Here's a larger picture of what that looks like. It's amazing. There's a lot of really neat amenities around this too. It's got 4 parking spaces, 1 for each home. One of them is handicap accessible, one home is ADA. It's got a beautiful gate around the whole thing, a gate that closes and opens automatically. Landscaping isn't there yet, but it will be very soon. And the inside's pretty much fully furnished, thanks to the money that we had available, thanks to some grants that we got, and to the generosity of some people within the city. I want to talk about that money a little bit, because I think if you spend as much time as I do on Facebook, that's all people care about. But here's the thing. Do you see that light-colored slice of pie? The light purple one? That's what the city of Lodi paid. That's right out of our general fund. The entire other 90% came from the state, which then went to the county, which then went to us. And here's the kicker. If we didn't do this project, you know where that money would have ended up? Not here. Because I guarantee you the city of Stockton, the city of Lathrop, the city of Tracy, the city of Manteca, they would have loved that money. And I don't know about you, but if there's $1.6 million laying there on the floor, I want to grab it. Those are tax dollars that I paid, that you paid. I want that back here in Lodi. And that's why we did this. We could have just said no. We could have just rolled over and waited for some other easier thing, but this was important to reclaim that money that was meant for us, I think. I know I certainly paid into that, and so did all of you. Now, of course, when you take money from the government, they expect a few things in return. There are some restrictions on that, like the ones that I've addressed. Right? So that $1.6 million through 2 different grants came to us, but it had some restrictions. One of those restrictions was that, like I said, we couldn't renovate, we had to build. All right? And it had to assist the homeless. I'm good with that. It had to increase the number of homes in Lodi. We couldn't discriminate against anyone, and it can't violate any environmental laws. That's pretty easy. That's an easy list for us to fill, and certainly something that is right along the goals of every organization that you've heard about tonight in the last 2 weeks. But like I said, it is use it or lose it. Now, we did partner with a lot of other organizations throughout the last, I think it was 2 almost 3 years, Catherine, since she put the paperwork in with Patrice in the city. We partnered with, of course, the Lodi Committee on Homelessness, Lodi House, Salvation Army, the Women's Center, the City of Lodi's Improvement Committee. We had a great time going door to door in like a 1 mile radius. We knocked on at least 100 homes to let them know about the project, to say, hey, you know that empty lot behind you that's been there? Guess what? Here's the plans. What do you think about that? And I'm not exaggerating. All but one person that we spoke to was thrilled to have this in their neighborhood. I think it's I have never seen, my apologies to the city, I've never seen a project get that overwhelming of support. It just shows that this is a no-brainer, I think, for all of us. Now, you're probably wondering, like, okay, how does this work? Who's going to run it? Well, we don't know exactly yet. That's one of those things where the proposal is out there, and we're waiting to see who comes forward with the best ideas. And they plan to choose whoever's going to run this. I think it's by the end of the year. Whoever's going to be the property manager, in essence, the landlord of that property. The City of Lodi owns the property, and they're going to say, you're the landlord, you did the best proposal, it's going to be yours to run, it's your job to collect the rent, to upkeep everything, to fix the dishwasher, the sink whenever it goes down, just like any landlord would. So we'll find out who that's going to be pretty soon. As far as the applicants, though, I want to stress this. The applicants can be pretty much anybody as long as they follow any rule that any renter would, any landlord would want to impose on their property. Your grandmother, my grandmother, could very well be a tenant in this place. It could be someone who graduated from the Salvation Army or Lodi House, and I hope it does go to somebody like that. All of these different organizations that I've been talking about, they know that it's their job to pass on some referrals, and it'll be up to that landlord to check that out. There's no limit on how long they can stay. I wouldn't want my grandma to move in and then be told she has to move out in 3 months. What kind of security is that? And like you heard Peter talk earlier, it's a housing voucher type system. They pay 30% of their income, and the government pays the remaining piece. It's fantastic. So one more time, that's a picture of what it will look like. We grabbed this picture. Jennifer, thank you. 3 out of the 4 homes. If you're wondering where number 4 is, so are we. The 4th home is a victim of the supply chain issue, but it should be here, we're told, by the end of the year. In the meantime, I'd say every week that you go by, you're going to see the landscaping come up. Pretty soon we'll get that 4th home. All the stuff around it will be built out, and of course that fence at the end. So thank you to all of you who helped make this happen. I'm super proud of it. And if you have any questions about the project, we'll address it a little bit later tonight. Thank you all for being here.
How you guys doing? So I'm Johnny Coffrin. If you don't recognize me, I usually have a hat on, and I guess I look like a different person without a hat. I've been told that quite a few times tonight. David, I was talking to Major Mark earlier, and he said Salvation Army would be happy to run the Harmony Homes project. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Don't put that on record. I'm just kidding. Surprised he didn't throw something at me. No, so I'm here to talk about the point-in-time count. If you guys aren't familiar, it's the homeless census, just to keep count of of where they are, how many we have in the town. That's all to receive county funds, and it all comes together. It's all San Joaquin does it all based on 1 week. They try to do everything within a couple days, so the numbers are accurate in case anyone moves and whatnot. Our date is going to be January 26th. It's a Wednesday. And as of right now, it's going to be at Gravity Church on Central and Tokay. We are hoping, we're going to give ourselves until the first of the year to lock that in. We're hoping to have it at the new Access Center to introduce that to the public so everyone can see it, but we won't know about liability issues and what we're able to do until that actually happens. So as of right now, it's going to be at Gravity Church. Typically there's John, I think we had, 80 volunteers at the count basically 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. What is it's going to be teams of 7-8 people going out into the community, and there's going to be different regions, so 50 to 60 people or so going out into teams, and then there's also going to be the hub at Gravity. Prior to the event, we're going to hand out flyers to all the camps, doing outreaches and whatnot, and encouraging those that are unsheltered to come to the hub, to Gravity or to the Access Center, wherever it's being held. We're going to have donations. We're also going to take donations out into the camps, providing hygiene kits, prepackaged food. Can't do really clothes and that kind of stuff out to the camps, but we'll have that back at the hub, so that's more incentive for them to come there and just get out of their camp, get out of that environment, and just be able to speak to them. While we're doing that, we're going to be going through a list of survey questions. Just asking who they are, understanding who they are, how they got here, and basically how we can understand them in order to meet them where they're at. The number that we had in 2019 was 139, and these are unsheltered, legitimately unsheltered, not ones that stayed in a shelter or are couch surfing or whatever it may be. These are the ones that were staying in a tent, in a camp, on the streets or wherever they may have been. We're estimating 200 to 220 this coming year. The number has increased. But yeah, it's what we have right here. We have a flyer in the back of the room. Unfortunately, I don't know if Jennifer knows this yet, the QR code is not working, but there's a sign-up sheet back there if you guys would like to participate. We're not able to allow any youth, so no minors. You have to be 18 or older in order to participate, just because of the safety factor and the unpredictable environment that we're going to be encountering. And then if you want to sign up, you can also, if you have a church or an organization that is interested in donating items, whether it be jeans and boxer briefs are a huge shortcoming all throughout the year. If you have a church or you yourself want to donate, if you could please put your name on that back sheet, but this QR code on the flyer is not working right now. Hopefully we get that up and running. But if you could please just put your name down if you're interested in the donation, write that you're interested in donation or volunteering, whatever it may be. And yeah, we also ask that those that may be more susceptible to sickness or not able to traverse on terrain, that they can still come serve, but they'd be better off at the hub. And then the hubs, or the teams that go out, there's going to be a team leader. So if you're interested in being a team leader or just participating, you can put together your own team or your own. We get a lot of churches that come together and they get their own congregations, and it's not just going to count heads. You're going there to get a first-hand experience, and you're not just standing in the camp. Now you're asking them a series of questions, and feel free to ask more questions, get to know them, pray for them, whatever it may be. But it's an experience that if you have not experienced it yet, I strongly encourage you to do it, because it puts you on the forefront. Right here, we're in a church and we're speaking to you, at you, you're receiving things, but until you're actually in the trenches, you're in the field, it's more receptive in your heart if you put yourself in that position. So I just want to encourage you guys, if you're able, it is a Wednesday, and it starts, the teams would check in, they'd arrive at 7 a.m., check in between 7 and 8, and then at 8 o'clock we would disperse the teams out, and we'd be asking all of the unsheltered to come to the hub after 8 o'clock, and then when we did it last time, we were done around noonish. Teams were reporting back between 11:30 and 12, and then clean up. So we were out of there by 1 o'clock. So it's just the first half of the day. So that's all I really have on what the point in time count is. But what the cool thing about this right now at this point in time count is where we are in this Access Center idea. Getting a survey question, we're also going to have some booths set up at the hub, and we're going to have the Access Center table that's going to provide information and whatnot, but it's going to allow us to understand the population that we're trying to serve, so that as we're going through this design process, yes, we've acquired the building on Sacramento Street, and we're in the process of moving forward with that. But what is going to make this thing tick? What is going to make it successful? So getting a deeper understanding of the community that we're serving, that's what I really like about this point in time count is it's time to roll. Like, let's get this thing going, and it's digging deep and putting it into action. So I want to talk a little bit about my personal experience. It's more from an addictive perspective, from an addiction. Catherine, can you hand me my water, please? My water. I come from an background of addiction. On December 15th, thank you, 2015, I went into the Teen Challenge Monterey program in desperation to break me from my 15 years of addiction to OxyContin. I looked into the Salvation Army, but I had to pass a drug test in order to enter the program. The catch to that is that in my mind, as an addict, it says that if I can get clean enough for a drug test, then I don't need a program. And I would get to that point and be willing, but then it just, trickery, deception. Salvation Army is great at what they do and who they're able to serve, but I wasn't able to qualify for their program. And unfortunately, there's a great number of people that aren't able to cross that bridge because that just the deception of the drug itself. The teen challenge that I went to was in Pajaro, and it also ran a 30-bed men's low-barrier shelter under the same roof. What this showed me was that the program was able to both meet the addict and the unsheltered addict right where they were at. I witnessed the cycle of shelter intakes become program intakes because the lives that they saw changing right before their very eyes. The guys that were just on the streets with them had made a commitment to change, and the undeniable results enticed them into the shelter to make that same commitment. This is what we need and what we're working towards with this Lodi Access Center. And God willing, Salvation Army be the one to both run it and adapt internally to meet the need of those trapped in their addiction. I said that we're still in the planning phase of this, and that's including operating. So my opportunity in being up here right now is I'm going to try to speak some of these things into existence. So we're hopeful, praying, but I think things are heading in that good direction. But a huge benefit of this Access Center is a controlled environment. It's very difficult to speak life to someone that is in their environment, that they're in the darkness, that their needle or their pipe or whatever their controlling substance may be is within their arm's reach, or they're in that negative peer pressure. It's just, I talked about a couple weeks ago, is just they enter this survival mode, and it's very, very difficult. It's like talking to a drunk, like trying to speak life into someone at a bar at 2 a.m. on a bar stool. It just, you don't get anywhere. It's so difficult. So until you can get them out of that environment, even just a location change, something that's different from where they've been, it's so much more beneficial. Getting them out of their freedom, that is literally holding them captive, and getting them into an environment that is structured with both security and qualified personnel that can encourage and guide them, grants so much more hope and opportunity for success. I also believe that providing a safe place will attract more than just the unsheltered. A couple years ago, a young lady came into my church looking for help in the form of a program. She wasn't clean and sober, so she couldn't stay at Salvation Army. So I drove her down to Teen Challenge in Watsonville. As we talked on our way there, she introduced me to a reality in which I was unaware, that women are capable of finding shelter much more than men because they're able to sell themselves. This particular circumstance included a man allowing 3 women, including this girl, to stay with him rent-free. He would provide them drugs, and they would be obligated to do whatever and whenever he asked. This young lady also informed me that she was aware of other houses in the area that had the same arrangements. These girls either had no family or had burned their bridges with their families due to their addiction and were literally being held captive by their addiction and being sexually tortured on a normal basis. Another story more recently, a woman that was being pimped out for drugs in Lodi. She found Catherine and expressed desire for program. I made myself available to pick her up in a couple hours, but within that couple of hours, it was long enough for her addictive lifestyle to fall back to her pimp and want nothing to do with me or her program. One of the huge benefits of having a low-barrier shelter is the ability to get them in immediately. I've witnessed a lot of darkness, a lot of death, a lot of evil, just due to time, not being able to meet them right where they're at. Having a local facility allows us to meet them the second that they're willing to step out of the darkness and express a desire for the light. Timing and availability is so crucial in effective response. And I'm only speaking on the addiction, alcoholism, all those aspects. But what the center is also going to provide is case management, mental health, resources, education, career opportunities. These are all things being discussed right now, but that we see very well possible on being able to take place in this facility. But the path in the agreement that we're finding is undoubtedly leading to a promise for the change in the results. I'm just speaking from first-hand experience of what can be, but who we're able to hear from next, Major Howard from Modesto, he's the one that's going to speak the reality to it, so I'm honored to welcome him up next. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to begin with a caveat that says whenever I take the credit for anything, I mean we. When we means my wife, who sits right there. And I'm not saying that because she's here. I'm saying that because in the Salvation Army, when you're married and you're an officer, you do everything together. So her and I work together every day, every minute. And any success that I have, she has, and all of our successes, every single one, is based on the love and blessing of our Savior. And we give all the credit for the successes that the Modesto Salvation Army has witnessed over the last couple of years. We give that credit to God and God alone. Okay, so everybody get that, right? So ignore me if I take credit for anything. Okay, so I want to start off with this. First, I want to start off with some encouragement, specifically for encouragement for low barrier shelters and access centers and finding funding. So if you do not know the state of our current state, the financial state of our current state is last July, our governor announced that California finished with a $76 billion surplus, and he started to divvy up that surplus money to many, many different programs. And many of those programs are to spend that surplus over a 2-year period. I tell you that for this reason. The Salvation Army this year, this fiscal year in Modesto, will collect more than $9 million in grant money. $9 million. There is more money available in the next 24 months from Sacramento than any time you've ever seen in history. I can guarantee it. Now, I'm not saying there's going to be enough, because it's probably never enough, but I'm saying is there's more money available for your community, no matter which community that is, than there has ever been in history, right? Don't be afraid of grants. Are there strings attached? Yes. But as David, I think, pointed out, right? Yes, there's strings attached. They are strings that you can deal with. They are not horrible things. Everybody wants to make sure that there's not an environmental impact or things like that, right? Yes, there's strings, but you can deal with those, right? We got through it. You can get through it. The success of access centers is unprecedented. You can call them whatever you want. You can call them an access center. You can call it a navigation center. We've been in different communities where we have started navigation centers, my wife and I, or access centers, both, and they all have very similar goals, is essentially a one-stop shop where all the services of the community that a person experiencing homelessness can receive or access in one easy-to-reach building. Ours, the one that we have right now in Modesto, has 11 agencies based inside of a building 100 feet from the door of the shelter. You don't need a taxi ride, you don't need a bus ride, you walk out of the shelter right into the Access Center. You can speak with mental health services, behavioral health and recovery, employment services, the Social Security Administration, homeless court, you name it. Everybody is inside of that one building. That's the idea of an Access Center. They have experienced all over the state amazing successes. And I'm going to give you one of those quick successes that we experienced. The first 90 days that our low barrier shelter was open, the first 90 days, we had a 95% success rate in clients making their appointments, no matter who the appointment was with. Whether it be mental health services, addiction services, employment services, you name it. 95% success rate of finding people who are commonly dealing with mental health issues and drug addiction issues and alcohol addiction, where usually the success rate of making an appointment is 50% if you're lucky. You put an Access Center within walking distance, changes everything. Everything. There are amazing successes around the state of California with navigation centers. Now, to the page there. Are we on? Yes. Okay. Low barrier shelter. I'm going to make a couple of quick corrections to that one right there. So that page right there says that we have 182 beds in our low barrier shelter. That is correct. We take 50 pets in our low barrier shelter. That is correct. The next one says 50 lockers. We actually have a locker for every single bed. And to make things easy, the bed has a number on it, the locker has a number on it, the personal closet for each person experiencing homelessness has a number on it, and the personal tote for them to put their food items or whatever else has a number on it. All the numbers are the same. So there's 182 beds, 182 lockers, 182 closets, 182 totes. Okay? And then, of course, it notes that we have a 24/7 security. Whatever your Access Center, emergency shelter, whatever you want to call it, navigation center, security is important, especially when it first opens. You will have people move in who want to prey on those experiencing homelessness. Now in Modesto, we realized as of this month, the average age of our shelter clients is 52. Total surprise. We all thought it was going to be younger. Turns out now we have 24 people on our shelter complex that are wheelchair bound. So ADA is an issue that we were prepared for it, but we never thought it was going to be this big. Right? So now we're in conversations with our hospitals and with our county to provide things like respite care and medical services and all these things like that. And all those things come from the fact that we were not as prepared as we could be for the demographic of people that were coming into the shelter. Right? You do get, in that modern day, you do get more and more elderly, more and more of those that are on a fixed income, and more of those that have some physical or mental disability. Be ready for it. It's going to happen. And if it is, you're way better off. You're way better off. Okay? So we're going to move to the next slide. Our focus, a safe, secure, drug and alcohol-free environment while also offering case management, employment assistance, addiction treatment, housing assistance, and many other things. We have helped in our first 12 months in existence, 77 people moved to permanent housing from inside of our shelter. 77 in the first 12 months. All right, and then there was 90 that we helped get IDs and birth certificates and things like that, Social Security cards, all those things. So that is the role of our Access Center. Whatever they need to find employment or to find housing, to get put on the housing list, things like that, right? All those things can be found inside that building, right? They don't have to search for it. They don't have to wander around town or miss appointments. That's where they go. Next slide. The things that we provide to our guests. We provide hygiene kits, socks, some clean clothes and stuff when they first come in. Towels, of course. We deal with all of the bedding inside of our shelters. We have laundry services. We have washers and dryers. We provide all of the meals. We provide all of the casework. Now, when I say all of the casework, it doesn't mean we don't work with other caseworkers. The county has caseworkers from Behavioral Health and Recovery Services and from the county, CSA, and I forget what the acronym now is. But anyway, so all of the different agencies have their own caseworkers, but we provide casework inside the shelter So our caseworkers get to know the shelter clients first and foremost, and start the building a rapport with them. So there's always those that are experiencing homelessness that you can easily move into housing because they don't want to be there. Thank you. And then there's those that you need to build a relationship with. Our low barrier shelter, let's see. We'll go to our weekly classes and casework. And we provide classes on site: anger management, substance abuse, financial literacy, life skills, and conflict resolution. Next slide. Low barrier shelter, guests may stay on the property all day long. That is a specific requirement due to COVID. Normally, we used to be the way that at 7 a.m. everybody goes out and they come back in at 3 or 4. The community asked us to allow them to stay all the time if they so wish when COVID happens. So if you happen to have someone who is at high risk or someone who may be tested positive, that they're not walking around the community and making things worse. So we changed our policies, and now we provide all of their meals, all of their laundry services, things like that on site. Next slide. Our housing strategy. Of course, we are step 1. We are the emergency shelter. Next step, obviously, we mentioned this earlier with some of the other speakers: transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, affordable housing, moved on to rental housing, and of course, home ownership. That is our goal. Next slide. Shows a picture of our bed as we first started. You'll notice there on the left side of the screen that it looks like a dog cage. That is one of the kennels that we use for those clients that bring in pets. Let me tell you, we first heard of a shelter in Sacramento that tried the pet option. It did not go well. However, we learned from all of their mistakes, right? So that's the difference between being intelligent and being wise, right? Intelligent people learn from their own mistakes, and wise people learn from someone else's mistake. Exactly. So we learned from their mistakes. And what we did was we made sure that the pets were right next to their bed of the person that they're supposed to be there comforting. So that we do that. So we do that. We also learned that every single animal that comes into the building is spayed, neutered, and with all of its vaccines. Every time, all the time. Now, in the worst case, you get a bite or something like that. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it is rare. When that happens, you're not worried about rabies. You're not worried about all these things like that. We have a very good partnership with Animal Control. Animal Control provides all of our dog food, cages, leashes, collars, food bowls. Animal Control provides all of those things because now they realize they do not have to worry about the animals inside of our building. All right? The next slide is the challenges that we first began with, the 3 Ps: pets, possessions, and partners. And we addressed all 3 before we ever opened our door. Pets, we have the possibility of 50 of our clients to bring pets with them. We allow 1 animal, dog or cat. We do not allow squirrels. They've tried. Or turtles, because we could not figure out what kind of emotional support you get from a turtle. But so right now we have all canines. Partners is the Salvation Army is a faith-based group. Everyone knows it. We're not going to get into the whole partners, same-sex things, all the kind of stuff like that. The way we see it was every single person deserves to have shelter. Now, that doesn't mean you deserve to have physical relations inside of our building. So we have single-use beds in a co-ed dorm, and no one's ever allowed to be on, in, or next to someone else's bed. So all of our guidelines are behavioral-based, right? That's it. They're behavior-based. You have a partner, whoever that partner is, whatever, in the next bed, right? 6 feet away, 8 feet away, in the next bed all the time. Gets rid of all of your issues when it comes to activists and concerns and things like that. The last thing is possessions. I mentioned earlier that every single bed has a closet, has a locker, has a personal tote. All those things. Once we handled that and people could bring those things with them, the barriers for getting into the shelter became a lot less. The next slide shows our dining area. The dining area feeds both of our shelters. It's within the same building. Feeds both of our shelters at staggered times for all 3 meals. Next slide is our services offered: meals, laundry, medical services, and casework. The next slide shows our washers. Learn from our mistake. We mentioned earlier about being wise. Do not start with residential washers and dryers. Go right to the commercial ones. They don't break. They're bigger. They have higher temperatures. Higher temp dryers are needed in shelters because of bed bug issues. We haven't had a bed bug issue in a year. Why? Because we have a 190-degree dryer now. Off the street, the bag goes into the dryer, you turn it on for 30 minutes, Now we don't have anything to worry about, just like that. Okay? The next slide shows the shelving for the personal totes that they each use, and then the slide after that shows the rows of bunks. That is one row. Our shelter is built inside of a warehouse in an industrial area of town, so we actually have 6 rows like that, and our low barrier shelter has a total capacity of 182 beds. The next slide is our other challenges. Of course, we talked about pest security. Again, we advocate for a lot of security appointments, pets intake, HMIS. We are a member of HMIS. I would hope that everybody in the county is. It will create problems, yes, I admit. But I'm trained in HMIS, as are many of my staff, and it does solve many, many problems. It also opens up more funding for you. Thank you very much. We will be around here at the end if you have questions.
Wait till that stops. Man, I should have asked to go first. Pretty hefty crowd to follow, and they actually covered a good bit of what I wanted to talk about today, so they made my life a little bit easier, actually. So I won't bore people too much with a lot of repetitive items. But really, City of Lodi, we understand that we have a homeless crisis. We truly do. We know that COVID did not help the situation and that we need to work towards solutions, and we can't do it ourselves. We've heard the term a couple times over the last few months, small but mighty. We have a very small team in the City of Lodi to work on these initiatives. That's not to say other departments don't jump in and help whenever they can. They absolutely do, but we definitely need the support of the community. So, items like this where we get a chance to actually speak out, it's great. If you got a chance to come to our community meeting for our Access Center, we love hearing feedback. It really helps us improve and try to prioritize kind of where resources go out in the community. They've kind of discussed before that the smaller communities don't always get the resources just because our population's not quite as big. We've volunteered to be on workshops with HCD and HUD and things like that to kind of voice our opinion on that and how to maybe improve those processes of how those grant resources go out. But we definitely want to make sure that as we move forward, that the community understands we are doing our best to get that money out into the community. A lot of it we don't even keep internally, I guess is the best way to say it. It actually goes out into community resources, probably 99% of it. So with that said, what do we have on the horizon? We have our temporary emergency shelter, which is in conjunction with our Lodi Access Center that was just approved recently. We just closed on the Sacramento Street property not even 2 weeks ago. The temporary emergency shelter will be on the same property as that, so we do want to touch base on that. Outside of those 2 items, we have future housing opportunities. And how can you help? Next slide. So the temporary emergency shelter, you might be asking, why do we need that? Unfortunately, the development of an access center in normal times would probably have been maybe 12 to 18 months, but we don't know what supply chain issues or anything like that might occur that could lengthen that time significantly. We understand the need is now, and that we need to get those resources, again, out to those unsheltered and those in need as soon as possible. So we do plan on developing a temporary emergency shelter with a development timeline of about 4 to 6 months. So it would have temporary commercial tent structures. They would have heating and air in them. They would have support for the cafeteria, social services, the bed spaces for approximately 50 beds, as well as storage, as Major Lumbaugh kind of went over, is you have to be able to store their items, otherwise that becomes a barrier. They may not want to come in if they can't keep all of their items that are in their cart or that they've had. When you have nothing, it's important that they're able to keep what they do have. So we want to make sure that we have that as well. Once the permanent access center is operational, then we would be able to take that temporary structure down, but we could use it in the future for any type of emergencies. We know every year we have wildfires. If another community needed support, those are all things, so that funding that we spend on that wouldn't go to waste. We would still be able to utilize those materials in the future. And again, grant resources are very scarce, so being able to reuse those in the future is important. The temporary emergency shelter, even though it's temporary, would still have similar services to the permanent access center. So it would have wraparound services that have been discussed through the night, 24/7 security and janitorial, making sure the area within the access center as well as the neighborhood around it was clean and safe for not only the residents inside, but also the residents in the neighborhood and the businesses. And something that the Salvation Army kind of coined, and you've heard throughout our process if you've been listening into our engagement process for the Access Center, is a good neighborhood policy. They do a great job of talking to the neighbors, understanding the needs. If someone needs assistance within that area, they'll call up John, Narvez, and ask for assistance with that, whether that's cleaning something up or just talking to someone, trying to get them into a shelter situation. They do a great job with that, and we really want to expand upon that in the Access Center. And as Johnny shared, we would love for them to be the partners because they are the experts in those. And now onto the Permanent Access Center. We are very much starting to develop the model, but we are learning from other agencies and other shelters that have been open. Like Major Lumbach said, be wise. And so we are going to learn from others' mistakes. We've researched this probably to the 11th degree, but we are seeking assistance from our local social service providers, our Lodi Committee on Homelessness, our Lodi Improvement Committee, and just general members of the community on what we need in the Access Center, what the space planning is going to look like, what needs to take priority in services. Those are all important aspects, and the City of Lodi is not the expert. Most cities don't have a large social service platform. It's usually the county agencies that do, so we're learning along with you guys, and we're really just trying to do the best that we can to make sure that we have a safe, secure facility that can provide resources to not only unsheltered, but also navigate those individuals that maybe aren't homeless yet, but are on the verge of homelessness. If we could provide them housing before they became homeless, that would improve our numbers drastically. Because everybody that's homeless has a story, and if we could intercede in that story before it became that point that they were homeless, that's so important, and it would really save us in the long run. I think Major Lumbach was one that talked about medical costs, and also Mr. Ragsdale. Medical costs are astronomical, and they reduce drastically when these centers are in place, because someone that gets a scratch or a cut can be treated immediately. It doesn't get infected, it doesn't end up in a hospital stay. Or they don't call an ambulance just because they're cold and they don't have anywhere else to go. So those are all important factors. A lot of people think low barrier means no rules, and that is definitely not the case. There will be rules and guidelines that every individual has to follow. They can't be violent, they can't bring drugs or weapons onto the campus, so those are all important factors to understand. It's not a homeless camp, it's a shelter, and it's there to provide services and resources to them, to get them to exit that cycle of homelessness that we truly want them to go on to be self-sufficient. Next slide. So now when an individual goes to the Access Center, they go to the programs, or maybe they already have income, but they just don't have sufficient income. We don't want them to stay at the Access Center forever. That's not our goal. Our goal is to get them out as quickly as possible, as soon as they're capable and able to be on their own and be self-sufficient. The current housing market in California, as probably everybody in this room knows, is very difficult. Even if you have a full-time job or even two jobs, sometimes you can't afford the rent. When a one-bedroom apartment is $1,400 to $1,600 a month, it's impossible. And even those individuals that do have a roof over their head, sometimes they're in a room with 2 or 3 other individuals. And so those are all factors that the city is well aware of. And we are working actively on expanding our affordable housing opportunities. David just mentioned about our Harmony Homes project. Yes, it's 4 units, but it's a start. But we also know that there's a lot more funding coming down the pipeline in the coming years. Again, that was discussed earlier. More funding than we've seen probably in the last decade is coming down the pipeline for homeless initiatives, affordable housing. Even legislation is changing to try to get housing developments easier to push through. They're making, a lot of exceptions to parking and other things like that to try to make these more available to be done. So we have been talking to multiple affordable housing developers on potential grant applications and what we can do to try to get units in. Because in order for the Access Center to be successful, we need to have an exit strategy. We need to have those housing available for them. Otherwise, they worked a year, maybe 2 years to become self-sufficient and successful, and they're going to look around and see, I'm in the same spot just because there's no housing. And that could cause a backslide, and we don't ever want that to happen. So we were going to be working very heavily on affordable housing, but it's not just affordable housing, it's transitional housing. Transitional housing means that they can usually stay from 12 to 24 months. It's kind of an intermediary process. Generally, they don't have to pay rent or not very much rent, similar to affordable housing. And then there's the permanent supportive housing, where there is no time limit. There's more extensive wraparound services that are available for those individuals to become successful. And maybe that means that they stay there, long term, because income doesn't always increase. But as long as they're being successful, they're being members of society, then they've earned that opportunity to be in that housing unit for whatever length of time they need to be there. And so that's what we're also working on. And how can you help? So we get a lot of emails and phone calls about, you guys have a lot of projects going on. How can I get involved? How can I help? A lot of times we kind of point them in the direction of some of our social service providers because they are always in need of volunteers, donations, and everything like that. So definitely, if you didn't watch the last session, there was a good group of them that kind of spoke and kind of explained what they do. All of them need assistance as well. But Johnny talked about an instance that you can come out and help, and we need a magnitude of volunteers. We know that our point-in-time count likely increased, which means that our encampments have likely increased, which means we need more teams out there. So that is a volunteer opportunity. I do believe the website link worked because I just signed up earlier today, even if the QR code doesn't work for whatever reason, and I will touch base with United Way to see if we can get that fixed. But outside of that, it's important to stay informed. So the City of Lodi, during our whole Access Center community engagement, we did put out press releases, probably 9 or 10 of them, I think. We had our community meeting, we did Facebook posts, we did Nextdoor app. We actually created the Nextdoor app just for the engagement process. And we would still get people saying, I didn't know this was happening. I didn't know this was going on. I didn't know what locations you were looking at. So it's important to stay informed, whether that's looking at the city website, our Facebook pages, going to the monthly Lodi Committee on Homelessness meeting. It occurs, first Tuesday of the month at 2:30. Right now they're being held via Zoom, so it's accessible to pretty much everybody that has an internet connection. Those are great ways to stay informed of what's going on, and tell your neighbor, tell your friends, keep them informed as well. And that kind of goes in the next one of spread the word. But it's also important to spread the word of available resources. So right now we know with COVID and the moratoriums and everything like that, there is going to be a need for basically landlord mediation services. There's going to be a need for rental assistance. I left some flyers in the back for rental assistance. If you know anybody in need, please utilize those. And there's also Salikeen Fair Housing flyers in the back as well. Volunteer opportunities. As soon as the Access Center is up and running, I am sure those volunteer opportunities are going to increase, and we will keep everybody notified of that. That would be posted on our website, or whoever the operator becomes, that would be posted on their website as well. So just keep informed on that. Community feedback. I'm going to go through this quick because I know David's telling me my time is up. There's likely going to be, future survey opportunities. The Lodi Committee on Homelessness meeting, again, is a great opportunity to share information and feedback. But also, you can always reach out to us at Neighborhood Services. On the next slide, you'll have my contact information for the Neighborhood Services and our phone number. If you have any questions or you are looking for opportunities, we can always provide information on that. So I definitely want to thank everybody for allowing me to come out tonight, and thank you for all the speakers. I think this was a great informational session. Thank you.
I just want to ask everyone to thank all our speakers again. They were wonderful, so thank you. I really appreciate that. So tonight was a really good lesson for me that we tried to put too much into one session. We were going to try to take questions, and I'm more than willing to try. I realized we were going to wrap up at 8 o'clock. That gives us 8 minutes. I would absolutely commit to you, if you had a question, if you put an email address down to it, I will make sure it gets answered, and I'll get back to you. You have my word on that. I will promise I'll follow up on that. If there's a burning question that you really feel you need to get answered tonight, really quick, jot it down, wave to one of the ushers, and we'll get it answered right away in our 7 minutes and counting now. But also, please, I'm going to ask you to please do your evaluation. And you can put, she doesn't know how to manage the clock. I don't know. It's all good. Works for me. But just, if I have any questions. Sean, this is a really good question. We hear this a lot, and I'm going to just read it and see if anyone else wants to respond to it. But it says, I hear people say, if you build these housing projects, the homeless people will flood into Lodi. That is something I was confronted, that question, many, many times when I was doing the speaking on the Access Center. One of the things that we feel really good about in San Joaquin County is every single city, Tracy, Manteca, us, Stockton, are building access centers. They're building these low barrier shelters. So we're not alone. And one of the things that we see in Lodi is the reason we have a very hard time getting people to leave Lodi is this is home. Someone in Tracy doesn't necessarily want to come to Lodi, you know? It's that mindset. So that's not saying we don't see people from other areas. Yes, of course we do. But in our minds, the idea when everyone has their own access center and their own shelters being built in their own communities, it's going to be more likely they stay in their own community. I think we're going to be on the same page with that. Peter, this might be good for you. It says, what about using hotels, motels for permanent housing for single individuals? Yes. Yes, here's 2 of them, same one. You get both those. Cool.
So part of Governor Newsom's budget was Project Home Key. There's $1.75 billion statewide for the conversion of hotels and motels. That sounds like a lot of money. It's also going to be competitive. The Housing Authority is looking at probably 3 or 4 projects. I'm not necessarily certain we'll be successful, but we intend to compete, and there'll be a round that ends January 31st of 2022, and any left. So essentially, the state broke up the initial pass of funding geographically. So there's, I want to say, about $75 million in the valley. And then if that money isn't all spent statewide, there's another competition in February. So quickly, hotel-motel conversion is definitely a tool in the toolbox to build more affordable housing. That said, those properties have to be for sale, available, and then I think there has to be a community yes to take them on.
So there was 2 on that one, and this is a great question to end this on. What if someone doesn't want to live there? Strong possibility. I can think of several people who will struggle with the idea of living in a barrack-type setting. They struggle with anxiety, agoraphobia, just there's a lot of mental health things that we still need to work through, issues and concerns. I know there's a lot of discussion about the Boise ruling. We'd have to have enough beds to make sure we have a bed for every single homeless person. This is not a simple answer. This is not an easy fix. For me, as a social worker, if I would need to spend a lot of time with someone to figure out what was going on. What was their hesitancies? What are their concerns? What are their fears? And I would do my best to slowly address each one and find an environment that would work for that person. That's not done quickly. None of this is easy work. If it was easy, we wouldn't be here. So, not an easy fix, not an easy answer. If someone doesn't want to live there, it's going to take individual, personal care, a lot of time, a lot of energy. So, on that note, if you do have any other questions, you get home, you think, oh, I wish I'd asked, please email. It's LCOHCA. It stands for the Lodi Committee on Homelessness, California, @gmail. And we will get back to you. So thank you again for being a part of this, for supporting us, and participating. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
No one else was ever behind me. All these lights, they can't blind me. With your love, nobody can drag me down. Got a fire for a heart, and I'm scared in the dark. You never seen it look so